So here are the last four problems on the study guide for Algebra B, Test 6, Quarter 2. And number 6 is going to ask you to do an operation of either adding or subtracting polynomials, but in a word problem sense. So here we are going to end up having to find this missing area right here. And so what we have is a total area. So the total area is the distance from this point here down to this point. And what we need to do is we need to take away these little sections. We need to take away this section and this section. See, if we just cross this portion off, and then over here cross this portion off, then we're left with the unknown, which is this part right here. So that's our plan, and so we're going to start with our total, and our total was 6w. Fix that, I was using an x for a moment there. So 6w squared plus 12. Well, then we're going to take away these two parts. When we look at them, this one here is the same as this one. So what we could do is we could take away 2 times by the w squared minus 2w plus 1. This is just one way. Or I could write minus w squared minus 2w plus 1 twice. Either way, it means the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and do this work first. We're going to go ahead and double that w squared minus 2w plus 1. So when I do that, I'm still left with the 6w squared plus 12, but now I have a minus 2w squared, a minus 4w, and a plus 2. So this is what I need to keep this in parentheses because it's one number. Remember, it represents a distance here. And notice I'm taking it away from all of these terms. So I'm going to go ahead and use that column method. Let me go ahead and rewrite what I've got. I've got the 6w squared. Now I'm going to leave some space because I'm missing a w here. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space for the w term, and then I got the plus 12. Now I'm taking away. So whenever I take away, I add the opposite. So all these signs are going to end up changing here. And then I'm left with this, a 2w squared. Now this is a negative 2w squared. A positive 4w now, so plus 4w. And then I have a negative 2. And then from there I can just add that together. So when I do that, I have opposite signs here, so 4w squared. Just a positive 4w, that doesn't get combined with anything. But this I have to subtract. I end up with a positive 10. And so from there we can write down that since this is a distance, whatever the distance is, it doesn't give us any units, so I'm just going to write down units for my distance. Always get in the habit of writing down whatever units you have. It's a good habit to get into. Well, the next one is a multiplication of some monomials. And so when we do this, it's pretty much like what we did on the last week when we multiplied terms together. We always, since everything's being multiplied, all we did is use the commutative property and took the coefficients and wrote those next to each other. So I have the 9 times by negative 8, and then bring the x's together and just add them up because it's all being multiplied. You got 4 x's and 8 x's. So I'm adding those up, and take the y's and add those up, 5 and 2, and look at the z's. Now make sure again, if you don't see an exponent, it's always 1. So 1 plus 9. Then you go ahead and do the work. Remember to multiply the coefficients. So we've got negative 72. We've got an x to the 12th. We've got a y to the 7th and a z to the 10th power. And there would be our answer. Well, this is one where we have now a binomial times a binomial. So binomials, we know they're binomials because we've got two terms. We've got a 3x and then a 1, and they're separated by an addition sign, or we could separate them by subtraction signs. So the way we do this is we use that FOIL method. Remember the first and then the outer terms, and then we look at the inner terms, and then we look at the last terms. And I use this often when we factor. And when we factor, that's when we already have a product and we're trying to get it or actually we have a sum and we're trying to get it to a product. So let's take a look at this first term here. The first terms are these, the 3x and the x. Those are my first terms. So I'm multiplying those numbers, 3x times by x. Then I move on to my outside terms. The outside terms are the 3x and the negative 2. So those I call my outside terms, 3x times by negative 2. So after that, It's pretty much the distributive property. However, we just call it the FOIL method rather than the distributive property. But that's what we're doing. We're distributing the 3x over x and negative 2, but then we move to the 1, and we distribute that over both numbers as well. Well, the 1 times the x, we call those our inner terms. So plus, then we have 1 times by x. And then the 1 times by the negative 2, those are called our last terms. So plus 1 times by negative 2. So go ahead and do that work there. And multiply out those first terms, we end up with a 3x squared. The outside terms make a negative 6x. Inside make a positive 1x. And the last make a negative 2. And so we can go ahead and collect the two that are the same, so that they have the same variable raised to the same power. So these two terms right there, they're opposite in sign, so I'm going to end up subtracting them. And I'll write the final answer as 3x squared minus 5x and a minus 2. Plus negative would be just fine as well. Well, last problem here, it's going to be using those concepts of multiplying, but this time with the word problem or a geometric problem. And so we're trying to find the area. Well, they give us the formula here. And the formula for a trapezoid is half the height, but we got to sum the two bases. So the height and the base are always connected by this symbol right here. See that? Right angle symbol. And so that's what we're looking for when we look for heights and bases. So this one requires some addition and multiplication. So let's go ahead and write down the formula. 1/2 times by the height. The height is the distance between the two bases. 2x squared minus 6. But then we have to sum these two numbers. So we write down, it's being multiplied, but we're going to sum that. And so we have 2x squared plus x, but then we are also going to add together the 3x squared minus the 2x. So from there we can go ahead and do some work. I can go ahead and multiply that 1/2 over the height to start with, and that leaves me with just an x squared minus 3, because I take half of 2 and half of 6. Over here I'll sum these terms together, so again I'm multiplying those, so I got to keep parentheses around it, and then combine some like terms here. So you see how I have a 3x squared, or a 2x squared, and a positive 3x squared, so that makes a 5x squared. And then over here I have a 1x, and a negative 2x makes a minus x. So now I'm ready to use that FOIL method. So when I do that, I'm going to be multiplying my first terms. Remember, these are the first terms here. X squared and 5x squared. And I'll go ahead and multiply them together. Makes 5x to the 4th power. So I multiplied 5 times 1, x squared times x squared makes 5x to the 4th. Then I move on to the x squared times by the negative x. So that makes a negative because they're opposite in sign. And there's 3 x's being multiplied, so it's x to the 3rd. Then we move to the inner terms. Negative 3 times 5x makes a negative 15x squared. And then the last terms. Negative 3 times negative x makes a positive 3x. So I try to collect any like terms I can, but it doesn't look as though we have any like terms. So that's as far as we take the problem. Since it's an area problem, we're going to end up using units squared this time. And that would be our answer. So again, there's more problems on the backside to study. And good luck on this week's test.